pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Ana Teresa Lobos and Christina Toppozini. Dr. Lobos is an associate professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Ottawa and a pediatric intensivist here at CHEO. She's also the Pediatric Critical Care Program Director and the Medical Director of CHEO's Medical Emergency Team and Medical Director of Simulation at CHEO. She has presented on these various topics nationally and internationally, with a particular interest in her presentations on the acute illness of the young child. Her interest in interprofessional education and the recognition of acute illness has led to her, sorry, I'm missing something here, to publish several papers in this area and to present at national and international conferences. She is currently co-chair of CHEO's Early Response and Resuscitation Team, and which has led to the creation of hospital-wide policies and education throughout the institution in relation to issues pertaining to the acutely ill child. You know, I think that her work in the area of simulation and the acute response is really tremendous for our institution, and we're extremely proud of all the work that she does. She's going to be joined by Christina Toppozini, who completed her BSCN from Queen's in 2003, and then has spent her career in pediatric nursing. She joined the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit in 2006 and has been a member of the Rapid Response Team. She completed a master's in public health from the University of Waterloo and is currently the simulation nurse educator at CHEO. I'll turn it over to AT to lead us on.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. This is sort of like talking about my second child, obviously Spot being my first, but there's no favorites. We love simulation and we're super excited to be here. So along with Christina, Melissa Langevin and Samantha Boggs are also going to join us later in the talk, and they're going to share their insights with regards to simulation as well. So the objectives of our talk is to really talk about this relaunch or reinvigoration of our CHEO Sim program, to understand the novel uses of Sim for education, patient safety, community, and family engagement, and learn about what we offer and how easy, and I want to stress this, how easy it is to get involved. We certainly want to also talk about our vision for the future. Again, I'll tell you that a lot of this talk is to really try to convince you that you can do Sim. It's really simple and easy. So before we start talking about the program as a whole and what we offer, I really want to talk about the people behind the program and understand where we come from and our governance. So the Sim program is a corporate program sponsored by CHEO. Our corporate leadership team consists of myself, Mary McNeil, and Christina Toppozini, and we report to our executive sponsors, Dr. Sampson and Ann Lynch, who report to Alex Munter. Many years ago, our Sim program only supported a 0.5 educator position, but fortunately, with a ton of advocacy and support from CHEO physicians, Christina's position as a Sim educator is now a fully funded 1.0 position. The very large yellow star near her head signifies her unbelievably, extremely important, I can't stress this enough, role in this program. She plays an extensive role in all aspects of the program, and she was awarded a CHEO Shining Star this year for this particular role. So the mandate of our leadership team is to foster interdepartmental communication and collaboration for simulation, and to provide leadership, expertise, and guide the dissemination of pediatric simulation curriculum and education and evaluation. Our amazing Sim committee is listed there, and these are just a small variety of the people in the hospital that do simulation. Healthcare providers from all over the hospital are engaged in simulation, and this committee recommends and supports processes to ensure optimal functioning of our Sim program as it relates to the use of space, equipment, human resources, curriculum, and faculty development. I really do want to mention two people here, particularly on the SIM committee. So Hillary Ryder, who is my predecessor on the SIM program and has been a SIM advocate and champion for well over 15 years. And Rick Guerin, who leads the extremely successful emergency simulation group and is our SIM program faculty development lead. The other people whose names are listed here that are underlined are incredible SIM leads in their respective areas and also for the pediatric residency program. Finally, the SIM committee really represents all of you at CHEO who are actively engaged in SIM. So over a year ago, in now what seems like a very strange maskless world of gathering and shared food and wonderful connection, our committed SIM committee met and we came together on this gorgeous day to talk about the direction of the SIM program. Our SIM committee is a diverse, creative, interprofessional group that really takes pride in being inclusive and innovative, thinking outside the box and optimizing learning. I think for many of us, simulation serves as a bridge to fulfilling unexpected collaborations that otherwise might not be possible. So SIM brings us together across many disciplines, across roles as clinicians, researchers, educators, inventors, and administrators. And together we can take on challenges, solve problems, and make healthcare better and safer through our simulation endeavors. So our group agreed that CHEO SIM program shares CHEO's values of innovation and creating new knowledge, learning, and teaching, and represents all of CHEO's strategic directions. We decided on our core values, which are safety, innovation, and mastery. Of course, conveniently, the first letter of each of these words spells SIM, and these other values as well hold true: respect, collaboration, and inclusion. Our very first SIM retreat was almost 10 years ago, and it gave us our first mission statement. This group, newly energized and excited about more possibilities within SIM, created our new updated mission statement that really encompasses who we are and what we do. So here it is. CHEO's simulation program provides a place where health professionals from all disciplines can come together to share, learn, and master essential skills in a safe, collaborative environment. We enhance and advance pediatric healthcare and patient safety through innovative simulation-based research and by providing high quality and effective learning opportunities for our partners and community. So 15 years ago, David Gaba, who's an anesthesiologist, defined simulation as a technique, not a technology, to replace or amplify real experiences with guided experiences, artificially contrived, that evoke or replicate substantial aspects of the real world in a fully interactive manner. More than 20 years ago, he created the very first patient simulator, and his idea was to have the simulator as a device used to help understand clinician thinking when handling challenging critical situations that would develop in surgery or other settings. He realized we really needed a systematic way to probe and study how clinicians would respond. One of my fave Dave Gaba quotes is, "The only way that someone in healthcare would stop doing simulation activities is if they retire or they die." So now, more than 15 years later, that definition really rings true. SIM is a technique, not a technology, and the term is actually very broad. Currently, we consider simulation everything from technical to non-technical simulation, such as verbal simulation role play. So after 20 years of using simulation in medical education, there really is no debate about simulation and its benefits. Earlier debates about whether or not simulation is effective have really been superseded by discussions of how it can best be embedded, supported, and funded. Frankly, simulation in healthcare has evolved into a specialty of its own, and its simulation-based medical education has become a recognized field with its own literature and traditions. I think at this point, anyone who's doing simulation now would likely agree that the only limitation in simulation is our imagination rather than technology. Simulation can really help us think beyond our established frames, inviting us to question our practice and come up with new solutions. I really believe that this wave of thinking, meaning SIM as a mode of engagement, a means of design, will change simulation from an exclusive resource for some to an inclusive resource for all. In fact, recently published literature is showing us just that. No longer are the SIM papers just highlighting confidence or comfort after SIM or improvement in crisis resource management skills, but researchers are using SIM for all sorts of novel initiatives. From in situ ed programs like the one featured here, which actually used baseline SIMs for a needs assessment instead of traditional questionnaires and surveys, to establishing trust with new team members on inpatient pediatric wards, And for those with eagle eyes here, you might recognize the first author of this paper, Katie Huff. She was a former STAR CHEO Peds resident who's now at Boston Children's Hospital. SIM enthusiasts are also using SIM to test new clinical spaces. Here's Glenn Posner testing an unfortunate field hospital at the Civic, and also to teach residents how to do real-time lit searches during clinical SIM. So it's a super clever study where they did a clinical simulation. There was a problem with what the management should be, and they had the emerged residents within the simulation do a proper lit search, and they therefore taught them how to do a lit search in real time. Finally, people are really thinking creatively and have even used a simulation in an interview process for a new department chair. So the benefits of SIM training in medical education are well described in the past 20 years of literature. Simulation-based medical education meets the goals of transfer of knowledge, strengthening of cognitive strategies, and skill development, while adding a very essential dimension of team training. SIM is definitely important in 2021. Studies show that our current trainees often prefer to work in groups with hands-on experiences. They prefer learning to be interactive, creative, and fun. And finally, the use of gamification is becoming more and more popular to motivate teaching and learning. So there's innovative simulation happening all over CHEO, and the next few slides are just going to highlight a few initiatives and exciting projects that are occurring. These are a lot of pictures. I will tell you that I have so many other great SIM stories that I don't have pictures of, but these just highlight a few of the amazing programs that are going on all throughout CHEO with simulation. We use SIM for training new communication staff in locating about overhead codes, and SIM during education huddles on inpatient wards for just-in-time teaching, such as chest tube training. SIM is also being used for nursing interviews and even by our colleagues in medical imaging to test out new equipment. Our neonatal transport team uses SIM not only for education, but for assessments and evaluations of their team members through a very rigorous OSCE certification. Our palliative care program has used simulation to train facilitators using the Serious Illness Conversation Guide. The bottom line is SIM is embraced by people all over CHEO and can be used to teach anything from critical resuscitation skills in the ORs, the ICUs, the ED, or how to deal with a violent patient on 6 East. I'm going to turn it over to Christina for the next couple of slides.
Hi, everyone. So as AT said, SIM is everywhere at CHEO. Our data from 2019 confirms this, as we have had over 2,600 participants use SIM, with over 30% of those simulated events being multidisciplinary in nature. Currently, approximately 40% of our simulations are done in situ, and 60% are done in our current lab. Next slide, AT. Thank you. So a great example of how to use SIM was highlighted in a program on the inpatient ward spearheaded by Dr. Jillian Seidman and Carrie Lynn Hall, the nurse educator. We love this initiative because it really demonstrates that SIM doesn't have to be overly complicated or overwhelming. For Jillian and Carrie Lynn, the objective for the SIM was to get healthcare providers to administer fluid boluses faster. They created a simple tachy-differential SIM and ran multidisciplinary teams through the simulation. Jillian gave us feedback around the process that they used, and she said, quote, we use SIM to achieve the objective. It really seems like an easy SIM, but honestly, everyone got so much out of it. We did a lot of teaching around fluid boluses and are slowly trying to change some of the culture around boluses on the ward. As an example, fluid boluses should be given in 20 minutes, not over an hour. The MDs need to order the amount of time it should be given over, and if they don't, the nurses need to ask how long.
So while there's so many exciting SIM initiatives happening at CHEO, I do want to highlight a few that are really innovative. I want to give kudos to the ED attendings. So while many attending physicians would really worry about putting themselves in the SIM as participants, the ED physicians have embraced the anxiety and put themselves in the SIM, testing and refining their skills. These SIMs are about twice a month and are facilitated by experts in simulation. They follow the Royal College Pediatric Emergency Medicine SIM curriculum and provide Section 3 credits for the Royal College. Another SIM initiative that we really want to highlight is the First 5 Minutes course. This First 5 course was born out of recommendations from the Early Response and Resuscitation Committee. After reviewing years of data from real code blues at CHEO, there was a clear signal that healthcare providers needed education targeted towards the first 5 minutes of a life-threatening event, especially when it came to establishing leadership. Studies have shown that even without an increase in medical knowledge, providers with better CRM skills give better patient care in times of crisis. A 45-minute interactive sim course was developed that incorporated the 5 key steps for any healthcare provider in the first 5 minutes of an acute event, starting with establishing leadership. Instead of care providers entering the room asking, "What's going on?" which we hear a lot, they're instructed to say something like, "Hi, I'm AT, I'm from critical care, who's in charge?" This simple sentence ensured that a leader would be established and kept healthcare providers on track, focusing their efforts on ABC assessment. Instead of a typical debrief at the end of the SIMS, the first 5-minute course incorporates the rapid cycle deliberate practice debriefing, almost like a coach teaching an athlete a specific skill and having them practice, refine, and repeat. One of our previous, again, superstar CHEO residents and PICU fellows, Ranish Gupta, who's a critical care attending now at MAC, has written up our program and study results for publication. We've trained hundreds of people in First 5. Currently, First 5 is offered all over the hospital and outside as well. All the PGY1s and nurses receive it as part of their orientation. It's provided to all the ambulatory care and even medical imaging staff, including people who are not physicians and are not nurses, such as EEG techs, EKG techs. Our excellent senior residents have also received instructor training and now teach the residents the course as well. Christina has also brought the First 5 course to Brewer and other offsite ambulatory clinics all around Ottawa. Another program I'd like to highlight is the Pieces program, and this is led by Dr. Heather O'Reilly. Heather is an anesthetist who has completed a year of critical care training and also a simulation fellowship. She now runs a multidisciplinary program in the OR and PACU for all types of crisis events, as we've listed here. Heather and her team have made essential teaching videos as well using simulation to highlight key steps in critical events. Okay, this is a real test of my audiovisual capabilities. So we're going to see how this goes. Christina, I need you to nod if you can hear it when it comes on. We're going to try this. Let's see. Maybe, yes.
Okay, so we're going to change the filter. Can I get the clamp? Wonderful.
And there.
Turn the ventilator off.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, on those. Resume ventilation.
Resume ventilation. Okay.
Don't you love that soothing music? It's hilarious. We're really excited about that. I'm going to switch gears to Christina to talk about innovative education beyond our walls.
So while we've talked a lot about the great work we've all done at CHEO, we actually have brought SIM to quite a variety of places outside our walls here at CHEO. So for years, our ED and TREC outreach program have traveled to community and partner hospitals, such as those in Gatineau, Cornwall, Deep River, and Kingston, providing outstanding on-site simulation-based education. In addition, the SIM program has put on a yearly pediatric skills day for nurses in our community hospitals. The SIM program also supports both the MD PALS program and the RN RRT PALS programs. In our new virtual world, simulation experts have gotten creative in incorporating simulation in medical education for a wide audience. An example of this was spearheaded by Drs. Kimo Murdo, Heather O'Reilly, and Elaine Leung. The project used virtual 360 technology, thanks to help from Dr. Glenn Posner from the USCC, to bring a massive hemorrhage scenario to life. The video is used to supplement all materials and protocols used for the massive hemorrhage of a pediatric patient to highlight how to approach the situation. So AT is going to start the video.
What I'm going to say is this is a 360 video. So on your own computer, you could actually move around the room. For the purposes of this, we're not going to move, but you'll see how it goes. Dr. Posner's also chosen some funky music to get us started. Actually,
Mobilize the leg?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to check for the material.
I'll call critical.
Sorry.
didn't let you hear the music. What you would see for this 360 video is that you could actually span around the room, you can zoom in, you can get closer, and you can actually follow specific healthcare providers as they're providing care. We also want to highlight another really great SIM outreach program initiated by another superstar graduate of the CHEO residency program. Dr. Gautam Kumar asked critical care SIM experts to develop and facilitate an annual 2-day simulation course for participating and practicing pediatricians. This multi-D course includes critical care level simulations and put every pediatrician in Sudbury in the hot seat. Hillary and I were super impressed by their enthusiasm and dedication to enhancing their acute care skills. Interestingly, prior to the course, participants were surveyed about their greatest barrier to participating in SIM. Not surprisingly, over 80% said their biggest barrier was anxiety. They said things like they'd be super embarrassed in front of their colleagues. They might make a fool of themselves. They felt like they looked dumb in front of their peers. They didn't want to make a mistake. However, I'm happy to report that after the experience, only 16% felt somewhat anxious for the next SIM. I'm going to turn this over to Melissa to talk about using SIM and patient safety. So a bit of switching gears.
So good morning, everyone. One of the, both AT and Christina talk about innovation in simulation and where we're taking it and how we're going to use this tool. And simulation, as with the aviation industry, was born out of the necessity to create a safe learning environment, but especially to create opportunities where we can rehearse and we can practice these high stakes, low frequency and high impact events. As an organization, we need to be more comfortable with knowing where our gaps are and recognize that some events do need that safe learning space to be optimized before the next real but rare patient encounter occurs. So just out of curiosity, and you guys can just unmute yourselves and say it, where do you think on the spectrum here, from motocrossing, let's say without a helmet, to taking a plane, like taking a transatlantic flight, where does healthcare fall in the risk spectrum? So just healthcare, being admitted to hospital, being taken care of in a hospital, where would you say your risk of death or adverse event would fall on this spectrum?
Close to the motocross.
Close to the
Yes.
motocross?
Correct.
Right up there with bungee jumping. Exactly. And so, you know, it's always incredibly humbling to us to realize that healthcare and the associated total lives lost per year are comparable and higher than bungee jumping or mountain climbing. Now, we always have to remember that we have a lot more people going to hospitals than people who are bungee jumping and mountain climbing. But it brings us to looking at some data. Intuitively, we perceive healthcare as safe, or at least we perceive healthcare workers as having an honest and truthful intent of giving the safest care possible. When we look at the Canadian Pediatric Adverse Event Study that was published in CMAJ in 2012, it showed that 9%, so across Canada, 9% of admitted children incur an adverse event over the time of their admission. Recently, so hot off the press of April 2020, Amy Plint and colleagues from both the PICU and the ED here at CHEO published in BMJ Quality and Safety and showed that 1 in 40 children seen in our ED suffer an adverse event related to their ED care. And a high proportion, both in the BMJ study and in the CMAJ study, the Canadian Safety Adverse Event Study, showed a high proportion of these were entirely preventable. And so it's important to ask ourselves, well, how does SIM make CHEO safer? Because it does. So there's 4 big elements that have contributed, that are contributing to how CHEO safety is improving. So the first one is that our program has been involved in all stages of creation, fine-tuning, and deployment of new protocols and procedures. For some, well-established, like Code Blue. So Code Blue has existed for a long, long time. The the program continues to provide education and correct policies and make sure that we're more comfortable in our environment for staff throughout the hospital. So it's important to remember that Code Blue isn't just emerge in ICU, and it's really throughout the hospital. For others, like Code Orange, and I'll talk a little bit about it later on, the SIM program was used to actually rebuild the entire procedure, adapted from the ED's layout. And then for others, it really helps to optimize the procedure, like our code, our massive transfusion protocol, like Code Brown and COVID procedures. There was a huge amount of SIM that went into that. And so you'll remember that when we moved to Epic, we used SIM a lot in order to be able to know how our previously established procedures and order sets and so on would translate into the Epic environment. And so many of you were involved in those simulations. The other part, and this I have to say is the leadership of Christina and AT in our SIM program, and Christina brought this on very early on, was to ensure that the SIM program was taking all of the latent safety threats, events that occurred during SIM experiences and treated them as true SRS. So true safety reporting, because if they are occurring in SIM, they very well could be happening in the real world. And so rightfully, she identified that these were perfect opportunities for us to improve our clinical environment and teams without risk to our vulnerable patients. And that is true innovation. The other piece is that the SIM program has now switched to deliberately analyzing adverse events. And so we'll talk about that in the next slide, but looking at how do we then take our adverse events and learn from them. And then the last part is going beyond analyzing adverse events, because we've been doing that for years and years, and then testing our interventions before we implement them. So this slide talks about why is SIM better? So why is using that tool better when we're looking at safety in a hospital? Well, first of all, it's testing in a real environment. It allows us to actually put it in. So we're going away from the SIM center and saying in the ED, in the PICU, on the ward, in radiology. It's safe and it's risk-free. Now, with proper debriefing and with proper pre-briefing to participants, there are no risks to the patients because there are no real life patients, or if they're real life patients, they have been prepared. If we have actors, it is proportionately a short time commitment for big gains. We can learn a lot. It's blame-free, and so it is very much coming from a place of curiosity, from a place of learning, and a place of wanting to improve. We have immediate debriefing, and so we're allowed to see something that happens, and then we're allowed to look at it and be introspective about it and say what might be going on. And then lastly, that debriefing that happens in a simultaneous, direct way happens with the key members of the team that are part of what's going on, and in the setting of looking at adverse events, also allows us to ask specifically about the events that have happened and push things further, because they're not in a position where they're feeling on the defensive because of something that's just happened to a patient.
So like Melissa said, we've actually been tracking latent patient safety events discovered through SIM since 2016. And so since we've started, we've actually logged 274 QI initiatives. And honestly, this information is already out of date because we ran 2 SIMs yesterday and found a couple more initiatives. We have filed 32 SRS events and created 2 vector tickets. Out of all of those 247 QI events, we've managed to resolve 194 of them. When we track this data, we categorize it into either education and training, EPIC documentation, resources, equipment, or policy and procedure. So some of the bigger QI events that we resolved include the tone that you hear overhead now when there's a code blue that goes off. So we heard from staff during simulation that they don't always get the page like they should, or they'll be busy in a patient room and can't hear the overhead page. And so we implemented the code blue tone and have had great feedback during SIMs from that. One of the other ones that we are quite proud of is how we rearranged recess based on feedback from simulation. So we actually moved the baby bed from bed spot 4 in recess to bed spot 3 to give the team more room to work. For those who are interested in this kind of simulation, there are a lot of resources out there that are available. And I just wanted to highlight this course provided by SIM Canada that is currently sold out, but we're hoping they'll run more. And it features some work done by our CHEO SIM program on adverse events.
So we want to take a minute to have a conversation about what we have now coined simulation-based event analysis. When you look at the literature, it shows that despite increasing resources that have been devoted to adverse events in the last 15 years, more understanding and having repeated reviewing of adverse events, the rates remain steady over time. So adverse events in hospitals are not changing. So what we've learned, and I was saying earlier on, is that simulation supports curiosity. And the more you debrief teams, the more you realize that the answer to why a clinician makes a decision is never as simple as it may seem on the surface. And so when a few years ago, AT and I were having a conversation and we were saying, I think we can use simulation to look at these adverse events and use this concept that mistakes aren't crimes to be punished, but really they're puzzles to be solved. Why are these happening? Why are things happening over and over? And so we created a protocol to say that to have a look at an adverse event. So choose an adverse event that happened at CHEO, put it in the in situ environment, briefed teams, separate teams that had not been involved in the original event. So we pre-briefed them, we debriefed them, ensured follow-up with them, and then came up with very specific recommendations following those simulated adverse events in how we can make better system-wide changes. And so our work showed unique causes of error and different strategies for intervention. And most importantly, also then switch to saying, well, that's not enough. Now that we've found recommendations, what we realize is that we tend to implement recommendations and then the event still continues to happen. So we said, okay, let's put it through the protocol one more time. Now let's take our recommendations that were taken from these simulations and let's put them through the ringer again. Let's have new teams tell us, did that work? Did that help? Did it prevent the mistake from happening? And that was really key. So we'll show you an example from our study. So we used epinephrine. Everyone is aware there's a lot of data out there actually about errors with epinephrine administration. And so the adverse event that had happened at our institution stemmed from a patient who had received 5 mils of 1 in 1,000 epi IV for the treatment of anaphylaxis when it should have been 0.5 milligrams of the 1 in 1,000, but IM. And so the traditional event analysis, which is our M&M rounds, which you are all familiar with, recommended 3 things: provide education on anaphylaxis, review the ward stock on the wards and see if they could safely be removed, and develop an order set. Does this seem familiar, right? If you think about all of the recommendations that we often make at M&M rounds, this is very familiar, right? Let's educate, let's go back, let's make a PPO, let's see how we can systematically have a look at this. So we put it through our protocol and went through what we're now calling simulation-based event analysis and had some very rich, we had over 50 comments about like qualitative comments about what we could do, and some key elements came out. We have to create a kit. So we have to take away the vials. So that one of the recommendations was just take away the 1 in 1,000 vials from the ward stock, leave it on the code cards, create a kit that says this is for use with anaphylaxis with do not give IV. The other one is that we created a poster, and the poster went through multiple iterations because the poster actually had the original photos that we had on our anaphylaxis action plan, and the teams kept saying, we're not seeing it. It looks too much like a home prescription. And so what you see in the red there, which says stop anaphylaxis, and it says do not give IV epi, was what prevented the error from happening over and over. Most importantly, and I think that this is when you start seeing that when you have individual recommendations in an institution, when you're thinking about impact on a healthcare level, you want to be able to see that you can disseminate it and you can apply it to other centers, because then you know that you're really getting to the crux of the problem and you're helping other institutions grow. And so McMaster adopted our kits, and AT received an email shortly after that happened where the person who instituted the kit said, your kit literally saved a child from receiving a dose of IV epi. They got the right treatment instead, and they did great, which I think there is no better feeling as an educator that you have allowed, you've gone through a protocol which has now helped not only your institution, but other institutions in trying to solve this sort of, this issue that keeps coming up again. And then even more so, I think as researchers, when we develop a protocol and it's used, there's a lot of the next step, which is always translating research into applicability and to our institution, which is exactly what Christina then did. Being aware of the protocol, having seen it into action, was then able to take it for a new event.
Right, so like Melissa said, taking a cue from the CHEO SAFER study, our quality and safety team actually asked the sim program to help with a serious safety event. And honestly, this is one of my most favorite simulation projects that I've had the privilege of helping with. So in 2018, there was a serious safety event that occurred with our PCA pump, resulting in a patient receiving 5 times the dose of fentanyl. The quality and safety team worked through the traditional event analysis and in conjunction with a multidisciplinary team, including nurses, MDs, and pharmacists, made some recommendations. One of the recommendations was to change the way the PCA pump was programmed. The quality and safety team wanted us to first simulate the recommended pump change to ensure it actually did prevent the error. So AT is going to show the shocking results. So we ran 22 nurses through this simulation, and even after the pump change, only 18% of the nurses programmed the pump right. And the reason why I love this process so much was that the frontline staff was fully engaged in the process of giving feedback and trying to figure out how to solve the problem. We also saved on resources and that we didn't roll out a change that in the end probably would not have prevented the error from reoccurring.
And so as we continue to think about these low frequency but potentially high stakes events, we know that for some of them, we just can't wait for them to come through our doors for us to test out our protocols, make sure our teams are working in an optimal way, and ensuring that we're delivering tertiary level standard of care. And you can imagine in, our numbers, for example, in trauma in kids are getting to be so low, which is great, car seats and all of these preventative measures, but we need to make sure that when they do come in, we're giving them the best care. We're giving them the care we would want our kids to get. And so simulation has been key both for the trauma program and for things like our Code 888 protocol, not only to work out the protocol, but also to bring interdisciplinary efficiencies within our trauma team, but within our cross-hospital team. So we're talking about blood bank and surgery and radiology, our TTLs and PICU, because unless we have a patient, we rarely have an opportunity to all come together and get people's input. Similarly, Code Orange, so our mass casualty event, is something that is very amenable to this low frequency but very high stakes event. One of the things that our Code Orange protocol highlighted is that when you're writing procedure, there are 2 sort of big ways to do it. So you can write the procedure and then disseminate it, and then once you've disseminated, you try it, or you have an event that allows you to say, oh, maybe we needed to change this and adjust. In our case, our Code Orange procedure was so out of date, it actually dated back to the old Emerge. We thought, well, rewriting it is not going to be efficient. And so we said, let's do it the other way. Let's simulate it. So let's say we're not going to put any work into it at all. We're going to simulate it as is, and we're going to get all of the comments about how this could be better. We identified large gaps. And then we created tools, documents, and local procedure that was what we would call simulation evidence-based. And so from this, we were able to update both the ED and the corporate Code Orange procedure, but also come up with innovative ways to trigger the infamous fan out list that we're going to be rolling out at a corporate level, and then order appropriate equipment for our team. And we were able to say that, you know what, so that the huge events are important. We will continue to do those. But what we realize is the most important is the first 20 minutes in preparing for a Code Orange. Because if you put teams and you give them the right information, they will be able to do the clinical medicine, but we need to be organized. And so we need to know in the first 20 minutes, who do we need to do? And so you'll see this in Emerge. We now have a Code Orange drawer. We have all of the job action sheets, which is the description of what everyone needs to do and all of the teams. So I wanted to highlight this because we often feel that we can't simulate things until they're perfect, until the formal documents are written. And there's a lot of lag to saying, well, I can't do this because I haven't written it, or the protocol is unsure. And this will resonate to our colleagues in NICU or the wards who are like, what about corners? I don't know what my protocol looks like. It doesn't matter. You can, because intuitively as clinicians, we have a structure of how we do things. And we have default mechanisms that we do revert to. So you can say, sim, and then you can build from that. You can say, okay, this is baseline. Now, how are we going to create a tool that really works for us? And then your final document is actually much more responsive. So it doesn't matter if you highlight, hey, we have a lot of gaps. Perfect. Now we can bridge them. And it's a good opportunity to shout out to Kyla Smith, who's the emergency preparedness coordinator, and who's championing with Christina a 5-year plan for training and exercising for the codes, Code Blue, but all of the other codes throughout CHEO, to make sure that we have a resilient organization who feels confident in all of the different color codes behind your badge.
So one other emergency preparedness project we wanted to highlight was actually how we use simulation to work through different COVID scenarios. So actually we did our first COVID sim almost a year ago, January 28th, and it was weeks before we saw any potential COVID patients. And it was honestly as simple as AT and I grabbing a baby, AT walking down and standing in line and pretending that she was a mother who just returned from China to visit some family. So all told, in 2020, we ran 70.5 hours of just COVID simulations involving 422 staff members, and all of that work helped us create and adapt standard work for COVID in many areas. Interestingly, there's an article by Wagner et al. Highlighting in 2020 that roughly 40% of simulation programs surveyed globally did not use simulation in any context to prepare or train staff for COVID-19. And unfortunately, because of resources, many sim centers actually had to shut down completely. This was not the case for CHEO. And I think early in the pandemic, our leadership team recognized the use and importance of sim and supported its use. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit again, because we've talked a lot about sim for healthcare providers, but we're always looking to broaden the scope of our program. And one of our main goals is to further engage our community and our caregivers. So for example, right now at CHEO, we actually do some simulation to help teach caregivers. So we help them learn how to insert NGs and take care of them, what to do if their child is having a seizure, and how to do trach care. What we're hoping for in the near future is to further engage other resources like caregivers to act as standardized parents or patients, help create and edit scenarios, become sim facilitators, and potentially performance assessors. Next, there we go. We'd also like to highlight these two community projects we've been involved in. So we had some older mannequins that were adult, and we realized we didn't really use them anymore. And so we were actually able to donate them to a hospital in Haiti. And in the picture on the left, you can see that there's some nurses practicing trach care. And the picture on the right is of a company we partnered with called Osmosis, and they used our sim lab and equipment to help film medical education videos for health professionals.
The other thing we've done is use simulation to help engage the community. And as you guys remember, anxiety around return to school was extremely high in August. I think it's probably very high now. But at that time, Dr. Nisha Thampi approached myself and Melissa to see if we could come together in a unique collaboration to bring CHEO simulation experience to help alleviate the stress that schools are facing regarding COVID, all the while helping to strengthen their COVID management protocols. So we spoke to OPH, school leadership, obtained approval, informed staff and families of the initiative, and sent a team of sim experts to the school to address school protocols for students presenting with COVID symptoms while at school. We recruited a student, that's my kid, Sam, to role play as a sick kid. We made him pour fake vomit into a sink, and then our team split up and followed him, the cleaning staff, teachers, and the principal. We watched in real time the protocol in action and ended the scenario about 10 minutes after his parent, my husband, was called to pick him up. So what did we learn? Well, first of all, schools are super excited about this. They're used to simulation. They do lockdowns and fire drills regularly. Educators love learning and improving. And so we learned that as healthcare providers, PPE is also kind of our thing. And we think about contamination, containment, and protection much more intuitively than they do. And so what happened is the initial OPH protocol for schools left several key questions that were only discovered during SIMS, like who takes the student downstairs? What PPE should staff wear? Where do they go? When should teachers notify the administrator of concerns? And so after the simulation, we were able to create a better, new, clearer protocol for the sick student. We have posters for donning and doffing PPE, and we've created PPE kits for principals, custodians, and teachers. This particular sim project is now expanding across the Ottawa Public School Board. So you've just heard some great sim initiatives here at CHEO, and now we cannot wait to tell you how easy it is to get involved. Remember, simulation really helps us think beyond our established frames, inviting us to question our practice and come up with new solutions. Getting involved with sim is easy. And we really see sim champions at CHEO as people who are as excited as sim about we are, and they can't wait to incorporate it into their practice. Sim champions get other healthcare providers excited about existing or novel sim experiences at CHEO and are willing to work with members of our sim faculty who can mentor and support them. Our sim faculty are those who have completed some formal training in sim facilitation and debriefing and facilitate sim regularly. As they become more and more experienced, they become involved with curriculum development, debriefing challenges, and research. Finally, expert sim faculty can assess debriefers and act as mentors to new sim faculty. We offer multiple different courses here at CHEO to help you develop essential skills for simulation. Terry Varshi, Rick Guerin, and Christina Toppozini facilitate this free half-day course to help excited sim newbies to learn how to develop objectives, scenarios, debriefing with good judgment, and learn the effective elements of effective debriefing. They review all the essential components of sim facilitation using the LEARN model, so really assuring a safe, collaborative environment, exploring emotions, frames, and actions, and using guided self-discovery with advocacy inquiry. Rapid Cycle Deliberate Practice is another course we offer, and honestly, probably the easiest way for some people to start using sim. Rapid Cycle Deliberate Practice is a simulation-based instructional strategy that focuses on rapid acquisition of necessary skills. Like we've done in our first 5 course, participants maximize their time practicing patient care the right way, with instructors observing performance gaps and then prescribing sort of like a prescription to correct participant actions. The real goal here is mastery of key learning objectives with immediate instructor coaching and feedback. We really want people to pause, debrief, and rewind and repeat until they get it right. Kind of like watching your kid ride their bike. You're not going to have them do the whole thing by themselves and then sit down with them and say, how did it feel? It probably wouldn't feel very good. You're going to take them on each individual step, pause and rewind to make sure they get it right. So let's see how easy it is for you to do sim. Okay, so let's take Jillian and Carrie Lynn's example of fluid boluses. Their why in this regard was that fluid boluses on the ward were being given way too slow. Their goals and objectives included assessing a patient for dehydration and how to properly order and give a fluid bolus. They decided to do it on the ward with a multidisciplinary team with lo-fi technology. They didn't videotape it or analyze the data, but they kept track of all their sims and their outcomes. Really, if you have an idea, any of us on the sim committee are super happy to help you get started. When you do sim as well, when you're all done, just let us know and we're happy to help you advance your career with scholarship in addition.
So to help us keep track of all the great work that people are doing with simulation around CHEO, you're soon going to see these QR codes that you see on the screen plastered basically everywhere in our lab or with our equipment. And the intent is really to make data collection easier. So if you run a sim, all you have to do is grab your phone app after, scan the QR code, and it will bring you to a quick Google Doc to input all the data for your sim so that we can continue to keep great stats.
So where do we go from here and where do we see ourselves in the future? I think there's no question that things have changed since COVID. You know, we wear masks, we distance, we don't travel. We really think that virtual sim will be extremely important and relevant when the pandemic is over. In addition, we're looking for more champions and faculty to do sim. I'll say that there is no doubt that with the arrival of CBD for the PEDS program in July, sim will become an essential component, even more so, of ensuring residents have met their EPAs and their competencies. I'll just give a little plug here for CBD Grand Rounds with Hillary, Sandy, and Toby in May. I think they'll definitely highlight the importance of sim here. We're definitely looking for more in situ sim, so that's in the clinical environment at CHEO and beyond. In addition, Christina will announce that we have a very wonderful, excited, we're like, I can't even speak, I'm so excited about this space that we have that's dedicated for sim, which Christina will announce. We're looking for more community partnerships, increased caregiver engagement, definitely more research and innovation, and finally, after the opening of our new sim lab, Royal College accreditation for the sim program. I'm just going to turn this over to Sam Boggs. Sam is one of our ICU fellows who's completed her fellowship and is now doing a fellowship in simulation. And she's going to give us a little blurb about virtual simulation.
Good morning, everyone. So virtual simulation, as you can imagine, is probably can seem a bit trendy. So as you've noticed today, one of the themes is about how to make sim not only engaging, but more accessible. And so one of the things we've consistently seen is that the more you engage with sim, the more it supports your retention of skills, because in the short term, sim has shown tremendous impact in terms of learning, but obviously as healthcare providers, we're really interested in having those skills then remain at a high quality for a long period of time and translate to clinical outcomes. So despite all the wonderful aspects of in-person sim, one of the challenges is that there are still space limitations in terms of how many people can simultaneously engage, and there can be challenges, as you know, with coordination in terms of timing. So virtual simulation through potentially integrating virtual reality, 360 camera technology, as well as a more choose your own adventure virtual serious game model has meaningful potential impacts for how we not only train residents, allied healthcare providers, and attending physicians, but also how we engage with families. Imagine if they were able to go home and children and parents were able to play an anaphylaxis scenario where they had a virtual serious game where they saw videos of potential simulated anaphylaxis symptoms, and they were able to actually pick how they would manage the situation at home and get some feedback. What a tremendous way to not only involve families in their care, but educate them with the best practices that we so desperately want them to engage in. And similarly, in terms of integrating assessment on a more regular way, particularly with CBD, if you're able to track residents' performance as they make decisions and then engage them through self-debriefing or virtually facilitated debriefing for scenarios that are both common and important for them to manage, as well as meaningful but rare, you can see how they grow through as they reach different EPAs throughout their practice. So we're really, really excited about this. And there's already, I'm privileged to be able to work with a fabulous team at CHEO to help bring virtual serious games to our CHEO environment within the next couple of years. And we're going to be working with the transport team, our spot nurses, our pediatric residents, and potentially some healthcare providers to really see what the potential early impacts can be for our group.
So further focusing on our program's future, we realized that one of the biggest barriers to SIM is having timely access to the needed equipment. So to help facilitate this, we now have storage areas on the 3rd and 4th floor that contain manikins and basic SIM equipment. And so the idea is, if the wards are ever quiet, or you want to teach something quickly, then you just run to the cabinet, grab the equipment you need, and you're able to teach right away. So while decentralizing some of our equipment will help in situ sim, we do recognize as a program that dedicated space is still needed. Dedicated space allows us to run larger courses or weekly scheduled simulations, store equipment safely, and provide a venue for training sim facilitators. However, our current sim facilities are not optimal, and for those of you who have been in the lab before, this will be a very familiar sight to you. So it's actually a shared space with the sleep lab. So at 3:30 every night, the sim lab shuts down. We have to ram everything into that tiny little closet, and the space is cleaned and then turned over to the sleep lab. We don't have readily consistent access to the control room. So anytime we run a sim, we're actually in the room with the participants, which leads to a lack of realism. We don't have any dedicated or comfortable debriefing space, and we don't have any capacity to record. So here is the exciting news. In 2020, we will be opening the doors to our brand new sim lab here at CHEO. So it's going to have it's going to be dedicated space with 2 permanently set up simulations room, mimicking the way our rooms at CHEO are set up. It will have things like Epic computers, appropriate resources like telephones and PPE, multimedia displays for things like X-rays and ECGs, and the control room where we can control the mannequins from, and a dedicated debriefing space that can also be used as a teaching space. Entering the new space, you'll see this beautiful mural, and we really hope to capture the idea of being on a path to enlightenment and mastery. And other exciting news about our new lab is that we will have a state-of-the-art AV debriefing system. So this system will allow you to record and immediately play back simulations for debriefing or research purposes. There will be two systems, one fixed in the lab and another a mobile option, so that really you can record sim anywhere at CHEO. The most exciting aspect of this technology is really that simulations and debriefs can be streamed live anywhere across the world or stored on access at a learner's preference. Again, anywhere in the world. We see so many possibilities with this technology, including virtually teaching caregivers and our community partners. And the last project we just want to quickly talk about is the creation of a SIM smart cart. So we actually have a collaborative relationship with the SIM Center at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we're working with their team to build a smart SIM cart in design similar to the one that they created. These carts will help to enhance in situ simulation, recording, and debriefing, as well as store mannequins and equipment. So simulation will honestly you'll be able to set up, do your sim, record, and debrief in a fraction of the time it now takes you.
So in the last two slides, we just wanted to highlight the outstanding work of Media House and CHEO Communications. We're all, I especially am, but we all are huge fans of branding. I think there's a real importance of establishing program identity. And so throughout the presentation, you saw this beautiful new SIM logo that we have. And again, I think it really represents sort of that innovative and growth mindset. The website that is here now is live as of today. People inside and outside of CHEO can now have a clear online place to go and access all the SIM information at CHEO. We have our email that's dedicated for us and also a Twitter account. So please follow us. Finally, at the end of this presentation, to hopefully leave time for questions, we just wanted to reiterate that we are super excited about the direction of the program. Obviously, the in situ space has always been there for us, but having our new dedicated lab will bring new life into the program. Certainly getting more and more people excited about virtual simulation, having more people be excited about SIM and become SIM champions and SIM faculty will be essential to growing our program. We're certainly excited about our community partnerships, our caregiver engagement, and again, research and innovation. And in the future, we look forward to full Royal College accreditation of our SIM program. So I really want to thank my co-presenters, Christina, who is my sidekick in simulation, Melissa, who's done such a great job with emergency preparedness and all of our adverse events, and Sam Boggs, who's really stepped up and got excited about virtual simulation possibilities. Thanks very much.
So thank you to all of you for your excellent presentation. It's really fantastic to see how all of this has evolved. And it's wonderful to see the new space that will be available to the group. Well, I have a question just around the support for SIM on an ongoing. Presumably, you're going to need to have funding to replace equipment as it becomes overused or out of date, or and is the process for replacement of such equipment part of the whole capital budget of the hospital, or is there a separate process for it?
Yeah, so I can answer a little bit of that. Mary McNeil is on the phone as well as our ops director, and she can also answer it too. What I'll say is that we were extremely lucky and gifted. This is the work of Hillary and Mona years ago to ensure that we had the right equipment. They were instrumental in getting us our equipment, and frankly, the PEDS program and CHEMO paid for a lot of it. I think some of the work that we've done with outreach and the osmosis group has paid for some of our repairs, but certainly this is something that in the future we'll be thinking about. We've been lucky to partner with KHA, who have given us some mannequins, and the foundation as well. So we've done a lot of advocacy around getting our equipment. However, certainly as an ongoing process, this is something that we're always looking at. So the foundation is a great resource for us. But certainly as we move forward, thinking about using it more, this will be really important. I'm not sure, Mary, if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, AT. I think you've covered it well.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Other questions, comments? There is a question, Zoe.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, because you mentioned using SIM as a tool for achieving CBD competencies, but one of the big things that we've always been told about SIM is it's a safe space, you're not being evaluated. So how do you foresee kind of like changing that process in order to make it like an evaluation space to achieve those competencies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're very lucky that we have so many people engaged in this. Rini has mapped our simulation program with Hillary, looking at the EPAs, and Toby is extremely supportive of simulation. I think it's interesting, you know, from being a program director, we've gone to CBD recently, Zobi, with critical care, and we can use it for teaching. So you're absolutely right, a safe space, attainment of skills. But we can also use it for assessment. And so as an example with my own fellows, there was a couple of the EPAs for critical care that they weren't able to get clinically for procedures especially. And so using SIM as a way to assess procedural setup, procedural skills was really important. I think we have some great experience with our neonatal transport team who are using it for OSCEs. And then nationally, we do a SIM sort of qualitative assessment for critical care for our fellows. So I think there's lots of expertise into how we move towards assessment. You're right. We've always taught about it as a safe space, and I think it will remain safe for teaching, but I do think there will be a role over time for an assessment. I don't know if Hillary or Rini or Toby are listening and wanted to add in, but I think that's coming for sure.
Yeah, I could probably just, go ahead, Toby, go ahead.
No, it's okay, Hillary, go ahead.
Just maybe to add, Zoe, that to remember that, you know, the competencies for CBD and how residents achieve them is all about observations of assessments, and it is any number of assessments in time that we would be doing with the idea that it's really not an examination, it is just an observation of your performance with not necessarily any expectations for that performance at any moment in time, but that as you learn, that performance will change because of the feedback you've had for each observation, with the idea being that the feedback is for your learning and your improvement, but not in kind of an examination type situation necessarily.
I think the other piece is going to return as well, come back to the pre-brief. You know, so much of it for the safety is in your expectations and what you know. And as educators, we do have the ability to say, okay, you're in a learning mode versus not. And so as it'll also fall on the educators and to clearly set out the expectations and the where those are, and also learning how we follow up and how we put, just like we debrief after real life events, and we have learning objectively, we have things that we need to learn about, we would still do that in SIM, and skilled debriefers and skilled educators will be able to set the stage properly and accompany residents throughout so that they have safe learning experiences, even in a testing scenario or in a learning scenario, and just create very clear boundaries.
Just going to get the final question to Dr. Gravel.
Good morning. This obviously has great potential, especially the virtual, for community practice. And I can think of a half dozen scenarios that it would be applicable to. My question actually centers around whether the program has been offered only to the Ottawa Public Board or has been offered to French boards, Catholic boards, and the private school sector for the COVID patient that comes in.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's been offered to everyone. I'll say that we started with the private schools just because they were a little bit more willing to move forward quickly on the project. Melissa and Nisha have gone to the French board. And so Melissa, I don't know if you wanted to comment on the other boards that are involved.
Well, for now, like you said, there's interest on all fronts. It's right now it's a matter of who has time in for dissemination. Because we've partnered with Ottawa Public Health. Ottawa Public Health is not board specific, and they are responsible for all boards throughout the city. And so the implementation, the dissemination will really be just reliant on who has availability and how we marry that. But because it's a partnership with OPH and they are responsible, you know, universally across the city, it'll be available to whoever is interested and has the bandwidth.
Thank you.
I'll have to draw to a close. Thank you all very much. This is really outstanding work, and really great to see it moving forward in the direction that it's going. Congratulations to all of you.
Thanks
So
very
we'll
much for
draw
your
to a
time
close.
this morning.